James Robison is uniquely positioned to speak to us today because he was part of the movement that helped encourage Ronald Reagan to run for president. And he was there when the moral majority rose up, and he could give us some great perspectives. So, James, thanks so much for taking time to join us again on The Line of Fire.
Well, Michael, it's good to be with you, and I want to let everyone know, if they've not read your article, which is a lead voice on the stream right now, I've had it. This is your title. I've had it with the line, but we're not electing a pastor-in-chief. You know, if you elect a leader and you understand what is so obvious, that we so often as human beings, like sheep, go astray, we need leadership to find the green pastures and to find the security from the predators and to find still water. You need a leader. You need someone who, in fact, has a shepherd's heart, even if you don't attach that to Scripture. We need leadership that's wise. And wisdom does come from above. Our founders understood it as divine providence. Yes. And without that wisdom, they could not establish a foundation that the freedom they desired could stand on.
So in that sense, in your mind, if you're going to vote for someone, must that person be a person of moral integrity?
I think that person must be a person of character and moral integrity, which does not mean that they have never missed the mark. Mm-hmm. It acknowledges the fact that there is a mark, there is a standard that we're to live up to, and when we miss it, we don't move the standard to accommodate our choice, however rotten they may be or however justifiable we may feel they are. We acknowledge that we missed the mark. We have a reliable standard. It's revealed by nature's God and in nature's law. We can see it in what God created, because all of these things are controlled by natural law. But we can also be influenced by a supernatural divine enabling, which our founders made very clear that the freedom we had been given through what they had established could only be preserved by a moral, and they said over and over, religious people.
Yes.
Which doesn't simply mean they're traditionally religious, but they actually have a relationship with a supreme being that impacts their character. I don't think we can have a great leader who doesn't have character based upon what we would call the Judeo-Christian principles.
So basically, the way our nation is set up, with the freedoms that we have, that if you're not going to micromanage with some type of totalitarian dictatorship or a king giving edicts and everyone has to be under that, the only way that this was designed to function was presupposing that Americans would be a moral and religious people, which would mean on some level the president has to reflect that for the nation to go in the right direction. Now, I want to get to your history, which is a unique history, and you can speak to many today that are watching perhaps history repeating itself. I read some articles, saw some quotes. When Ronald Reagan was running, there's no way he can win, and he's too conservative, and America will never have anyone like him, and he's too much not part of the establishment. Not only does he win, he wins a landslide. Now, many draw parallels to Senator Ted Cruz because the same things are said about him. He's too conservative, etc. So as people are now talking about that, the conservative movement being strong and alive in America, before we go back to the Reagan Revolution and the birth of the moral majority and the good and bad in that, get your perspective on it. What about some takeaways from the Iowa caucuses in terms of, whether it's Ted Cruz or someone else, in terms of the idea that conservatism and even a Christian-based conservatism remains strong and viable in America? Is that a right takeaway from the caucuses?
Well, I would hope so, although there seem to be some who are campaigning against those principles.
Right.
And they've actually gone to what I would call more ridiculous extremes. And they also get a cheering section and so forth. But naturally, I think that we can see what a people who believe in the importance of these principles that you referenced turning out, because the people who claim a relationship with God and that the media categorizes as evangelicals, as one example, and certainly that would also include Catholics who have a relationship with God the Father, these people were active and they impacted in that state in a profound way. And they can and should, as Ronnie Floyd, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, points out in a Fox News commentary yesterday, that in fact Christians can determine the direction and course of the nation through this next election by their prayerful participation. And you've been encouraging that, and I'm grateful for it. I think we really do need their participation.
Yeah, and listen, we have no business throwing stones at elected officials and complaining about their bad decisions when we didn't even vote, when we didn't even get involved, when we didn't even raise our voices, because if we had gotten involved or raised our voices, perhaps someone else would have been elected. So in certain ways, we have to take the heat for it. Why is there, though, often an apathy with many believers in terms of voting? Do we have a wrong view about, hey, pie in the sky kind of thing, and Jesus coming any moment, we really don't have to think about these things, or Christians shouldn't be involved in politics? Because often we lag behind in that.
Well, number one, the father of all lies is trying to move the people who understand truth and its transforming power away from the process, trying to keep us from having a salt and light effect. And sometimes it seems the enemy is winning. We don't have any right to complain if we don't participate. But I'll tell you another reason. You've seen this too much, Michael. The lack of integrity, the cruel nature of the political process, this iron sharpening iron process, is so uncomfortable to people that they just would rather go home and take care of their own business. That's the tendency of many conservatives. We can go on, manage our affairs, go on down the road, but while they're doing that, someone else is literally taking us into the ditch of depression and debt and defeat and total deception. So we cannot dismiss ourselves from the process. Salt protects the precious. If it loses its effect, the precious will be trampled under feet. We are watching that happen. And I'm pleading with Christians to pray, to become informed and so excited about what freedom offers that they will stand diligently to protect and preserve it. Let me make this statement about freedom, and I pray your listeners get this. The blessings of freedom are so indescribably awesome in the opportunity and the blessings it provides that if you do not have a personal encounter with the power source that gives you the character, attributes, and strengths to handle freedom's blessings, they are so great, it is very easy to begin to worship those benefits and to miss the source that provided it, the freedom that made it possible. Freedom is delicate, and if you do not understand the meaning of those blessings it offers, you will then become an idol worshiper yourself. You'll be distracted from the truth and the freedom that you've enjoyed and lose it.
And we see that then with kind of a nationalism, populism, American dream movement, which is devoid or separated from godly principles. So you want the freedoms, the benefits, without recognizing the source of it, and that's not going to get us where we need to go either.
It will not. And I want to say something. You mentioned the Reagan Revolution. I hope you'll bring this up a little bit. I think maybe you said we might go into a second segment. You know, I was so much in the center of that. And by the way, I saw when the religious right, moral majority, and all of that influenced the religious roundtable I was vice president of. I was a best friend to Dr. Falwell. We were close. I saw when that political power base became an appendage of a particular party, we began to lose our influence in shaping character and the very nature of not only the country but individuals necessary to preserve it. And indeed, it lost its high church impact effect. But here's what I saw in interaction with Reagan, and I would say this to every candidate. Hear this. I saw the most humble, teachable, gifted man I ever met with. Now, we know we've got gifted people running right now. You mentioned Ted Cruz, brilliant beyond words, smartest man in the room. But here's the question we would ask of all of those candidates. Do you have a humility and a meekness that is a characteristic of the Spirit of the living God, where you can be taught, where you can be tempered, where the friction will make you a keener cutting edge, and you will not be resistant to that which transforms even our minds and our hearts? Ronald Reagan was the most humble, meek, teachable, truly gifted communicator, dynamic leader with deep convictions, reminiscent of Washington himself. And I watched his surrounding people, those around him, were the exact opposite. And he had to resist the establishment to become the man and president that he was. But boy, was he ever humble and teachable.
Amazing.
Remarkably so. Remarkable.
The humble, teachable part We don't hear that enough. We'll be right back with James Robison. Thanks so much for joining us today. I want to continue my conversation with Reverend James Robison. By all means, visit the stream today, stream.org. You can read my article that was just mentioned. I've had it with the line, but we're not electing a pastor-in-chief. I'm looking at other articles. Bernie Belvedere, Iowa's 3 great storylines. Matt Staver and Keith Fournier. This major LGBT group wants Christian colleges exposed, then changed. Jason Scott Jones on the ground in Iowa with the Cruz camp. Thomas Sowell, Roger Ailes was right to tell Trump, grow up. And then breaking news being reported there. Lots of great information. And go over to the God section, the inspiration section. You'll be blessed as you do. All right, James, from your perspective, having been there in the days of the Reagan Revolution, having been someone that was able to counsel him and give input into his life, having watched the moral majority rise and, as you say, become an appendage of one party, the Republican Party, what lessons can we learn? What was done right back then? What do we need to do if we're going to see a God-based conservative revolution in our day?
Remain consumed by the principles of freedom and the biblical principles essential for freedom to be built and established and preserved by, and exalt those principles. Lift up a standard. Hold the standard high. Because what happens, as you see in Romans, when you begin to ignore God and you begin to worship the benefits and blessings even of freedom, just as they did when Israel entered the Promised Land, they literally had their hearts turned toward the benefits and blessings rather than the Lord that made it possible. And so what you have to do is keep holding those principles up, and you must not be caught up in the spirit of a personality or a party, because both parties, all parties, have room right now for correction. In some instances, we might say massive correction, because they are literally headed totally away from the truth that's essential to freedom.
All right, if we want to take a moral stand as followers of Jesus, we want to not impose a theocracy, but live righteously ourselves and have a righteous influence on society and advocate for righteous principles and ideas in the society. What can we learn from what the moral majority did? There are obviously many good things that came out of it and many strong messages that came, and yet you're saying that it became an appendage of a political party. Right now, all of the conservative candidates are on the Republican side, and evangelicals are going to have their greatest influence on the Republican side. So it's kind of a fine line to walk. What are some missteps that we have to avoid?
We see the reason that we're seeing the things better on one side is because those principles have been exalted, and people have said, we will not violate those principles. We're going to value all life. One of the weaknesses oftentimes of the, quote, conservative movement of the Republican Party is they have not been seen as individuals who cared very deeply for the poor and those who are struggling.
Right, exactly.
And I think you're seeing now, I don't care whether it's from the Koch brothers who are trying to reach out to the poor and those who are not educated and with their libertarian position, at least trying to offer them some hope and help that the government can never give them. The government keeps people dependent and takes away their incentive and their tenacity and the potential to reach for the stars, so to speak, and reach for opportunity. So you've got to correct the parties with the principles essential to correction. Right now, it seems that the party that's often referred to as the left, they have not shown the value and the preciousness of life. They have not shown the value and importance of the family when there's nothing that contributes to economic chaos and to the decadence in the family and the destruction of marriage and family like that particular mindset has. I mean, it is unbelievable that a party can espouse those things. And then the people who say they believe family is important and they believe life is important and morals are important and marriage is important, how in the world they can continually line up with that party rather than putting a trumpet, so to speak, to their lips and sounding a certain sound on the trumpet, get back to the standards. Reagan was the one that made the statement, I didn't leave the Democratic Party, they left me. Meaning that they left the principles that had been important in many lives and effective for so long. So if we as believers and the church will hold up that reliable standard that gives us that unshakable foundation upon which to build, I believe all parties and all candidates will be moved back. Ronald Reagan said, I know you don't endorse me. He said that to a group of evangelicals. Yeah. And he said, so I want you to know I endorse you. Endorse what? The principles that you espouse. Yeah. I wish both parties would get to doing that, where we could someday run a Washington against a Lincoln. Wouldn't that be a great dilemma?
Yeah, that would be an awesome dilemma to have. We've just got about one more minute, but you saw all of the pundits being wrong. You saw when Reagan was told no way he could win, and of course he wins by a landslide, then he wins by a landslide once again. You look at what's happening now. Can the political establishment, and I mean Republican and Democrat, can the political establishment be overcome that we can get the right candidate rather than just an establishment candidate?
If we determine the right candidate by the essential principles, and we refuse to move away from them. And I think the stage is set for it. To be very frank with you, we've got candidates running now that if they don't win the nomination, they need to have, in my opinion, several of them a cabinet position or an agency head. They are highly qualified, wonderful, principled people. They really want the wisdom of God. When they've come to me to pray with them, they didn't come to get an endorsement. They know I don't give one. They came to get wisdom and counsel so they could walk and lead in the right direction when the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate the wisdom. I appreciate the perspective. And let's stay on our knees and let's stay involved. Thank you so much for weighing in today. Much appreciated.
I love you and appreciate you, Michael. God bless.
Love you too. God bless.